Welcome. My name is DameSmiff III, and this is the first episode of the First Hip Hop Union. Now, today we're going to talk about career development for artists, healthy habits we can develop for artists, as well as current events and notable releases as it relates to artist development today in the music industry. So, for our first topic today, I wanted to touch on kind of a big issue, which is violence in hip hop. Now, typically, violence is usually connected to like negative things, stigma, of course, nobody wants to be a victim. But we do have to kind of take a look and peel a layer back and ask ourselves, why exactly is this so prominent in this genre specifically? Like, you don't see violence in like pop music amongst the artists, from artist to artist violence. You don't usually see that. So what is the root cause? Now, I'm going to start by giving my personal opinion, and I think my personal opinion is that the violence is marketable. A lot of it is easily digestible to the average consumer. As far as like when you consider art in general, you can look at things like porn. You can look at things like our movies, like action movies and horror movies and things like that. They're usually riddled with violence because it's visually attractive. The stimuli is attractive, right? And so typically in hip hop, we market it, probably, if I were to put a percentage on it, we probably market violence specifically about 40% of the time. Any other time, it's probably just, general crime or debauchery and things like that. And I would say about 25% is usually musician or artistry driven marketing. You know what I'm saying? So the big thing for me, at least what I notice in the hip hop industry, is that violence is, like I said, easily marketable. So what does that mean for you as an artist? Let's say if you want to get into the hip hop industry and pursue a career long term, because the average hip hop career is probably 3-5 years, and that's at the NBA level, right? So let's say you do want to get into this industry and be something of more of a musician than just another, pawn in the system. Well, my suggestion personally, as it pertains to the hip hop aspect of things and not necessarily the street aspect of hip hop, but the musician part of it, is that if you have any truth in your story as it pertains to violence, I would say that would be way more helpful than trying to market violence itself. And I can give you one example of a good version. I can give you a good example of marketing violence and a bad example. A good example, just to make one up, would be that if you have a experience in your life that may have, affected you either negatively or positively, but you've learned something from it, or you feel that people can learn from it, portraying that in your music and art, I don't think that would be necessarily a bad thing unless it's done poorly, right? So if you're going to, let's say, talk about a time where you may have committed something violent, but you've learned from it, or you don't want to necessarily glorify, but it is something that is important or pertinent to your life story as you're delivering your art, I feel that's pretty fair as far as putting that in your music. Now, here's where artists usually go wrong. They usually go wrong when they take their real life story and they want to make it a autobiography and not necessarily art. So the difference is like, for example, let's say I got into a school fight, right, and I beat somebody up, I beat them up, right, and I want to put that in a song because that's what the kids are doing today. They go out and they have like neighborhood bullies or little school fights, and they go home and open Fruity Loops and then they start rapping about it. Now, this is where they go wrong, because music is a reflection of real life, right? It is not the actual thing, right? So if you go and commit certain acts that are deemed negative or clearly illegal, and you say that I did this, XYZ, I was here when this happened, that's not art. That's just you kind of admitting that you've done something on a beat, And the best way to avoid that thing is to, typically artists, they'll embellish, maybe create aliases for names, places, settings, and things like that. But the idea is that you don't necessarily market violence, you market art. You're selling art. So just because you had certain experiences and certain mindsets and ideologies and things like that doesn't mean that that is what we're buying from you. And the biggest I guess, example of this in real time was when we all in general, I'm pretty sure we all kind of figured, but we all in general realized that Future wasn't using a lot of the drugs he was naming in his music. And the reason for that is because the drugs are products in America. We sell them here. So it was more branding for him than it was a autobiography of his actual activities. And that's something I think artists kind of misconstrue, especially when they're a fan becoming an artist. I think they can't really tell the difference. But that's what I'm here for. I'm here to clear that up for you. All right. And in other current event news, I have an article here. Let me just check my computer here from Music Business Worldwide, right? And the headline reads, Warner Music, Universal Music sued for patent infringement by Blue Spike over MQA encoding process. Now, this was published September 12th, 2022. And it basically reads that, as reported by Bloomberg Law, the lawsuits were filed by Texas-based Blue Spike LLC against Warner Music Group in a New York court against Universal Music Group in a California court. The plaintiffs hold over 100 patents ranging from forensic watermarking, signal abstracts, data security, software watermarks, product license keys, ASLR, deep packet inspection, license code for authorized software to bandwidth securitization, according to its website. The cases against the two music giants is in relation to their partnership with MQA Limited, which owns the MQA technology, which is an audio compression format used in transferring high quality audio to devices in a small file. And that's essentially how we stream our music today, right? So Blue Spike claimed that the companies violated its intellectual property when performing the MQA encoding process. So they're claiming that when Warner Music Group and Universal Music Group performed the MQA encoding process, there was an intellectual property copyright infringement, right? And so Warner Music Group entered into a long-term licensing deal with MQA in May 2016. That deal was aimed at increasing fans' access to high-resolution music globally. So their idea was that they were going to provide Warner Music Group and Universal Music Group with an encoding technology, right, that would allow them to deliver us, the fans and artists, of course, high-quality music for very, very little effort as far as encoding and things like that. They basically cracked that code for Warner and Universal. So the MQA makes high resolution music easy to stream or download to any device. Like I just said, music fans will love it when they hear it, says Craig Kallman, chairman and CEO of Warner Music Group's Atlantic Records division. Now, UMG signed a similar agreement with MQA in February 2017, with UMG's executive vice president of digital strategy, Michael Nash, stating that MQA's technology is among the best solutions for streaming high-res audio and one that doesn't ask music fans to compromise on sound quality for convenience. So you might be asking, well, then where's the problem, right? What's going on? Let me scroll down here. So basically, Warner Music Group and Universal Music Group violated its intellectual property when performing a method for protecting a digital signal by creating a predetermined key and manipulating the digital signal using the predetermined key when they teamed up with MQA. The plaintiff, MQA, said the patents in question resulted from pioneering efforts of Scott Moskowitz, which is Blue Spike's founder, right? So remember, Blue Spike came to Universal Music Group with this technology, and as well as Warner Music Group with this technology to encode their files so that we as consumers can get this music faster and at a higher quality, right? But what they realized is that Warner and Universal, at least what they're claiming, is that they were already or beginning to work on technology for themselves that was based on the technology that Blue Spike presented to them in the original contract, right? Or in the original relationship. And so let me find where I was. I lost my spot for a second. Let's see here. Okay, so the inciting incident that launched the company was the theft and reclamation of the founder's personal property. Now remember, it's intellectual property. So he's essentially claiming that they've taken his idea of the encoding of the files and, like I claimed with all the big words, securitization and things like that. And he's claiming that Universal is kind of like cutting him out as the middleman and trying to do it within their own sectors. So this is something that's important to me as an artist, because we typically don't get this information on the ground level unless we're digging into it. Like, these articles are clearly here, but these things are happening behind the closed doors every day. And things like this affects us as artists, because I know for a fact, like, as far as technology is concerned, I'm behind as far as the peak of what music is doing today, as far as virtual reality, as far as these virtual concerts, digital music. They're having artificial intelligence writing songs now using data, MIDI numbers and things like that. So there's a lot of things we need to keep up with as far as technology. Now, another thing to remember is that a lot of these technological advances are going to start out as ideas first. So if they're not tangible, they're not concrete or proprietary to where, like, you can't copy it or mimic it anywhere else, you can run into issues like these where you may actually develop a contract with somebody bigger than you or better than you, and they can kind of tweak it and develop it and make it themselves. Now, I'm going to keep my eye on this just to see what's going to happen as far as UMG getting the winning the lawsuit or actually having to subside to this. But I'm not sure if Blue Spike is going to have a case, because something like this, like I said, because it's intellectual property, they can kind of say, well, we didn't necessarily copy you step for step. There was something in between we changed. But like I said, I'm not too caught up as far as the legalities of how intellectual property is going to work with purely tech, but I do know how it pertains to music. And this is going to be interesting, because this will kind of set how we consume music, and it will kind of determine how the larger companies that help control and facilitate how we consume music will be able to do that. Because if they can't get their hands on this kind of tech, then what would be the alternative? So, all right, so now we're going to go on to my personal favorite new and notable releases that have come out. First on the list, it's my personal favorite because, I'm from the Upper East Coast. I first heard Long Live DJ Shay by the Black Soprano Family. I was actually just scrolling through Tidal, and it came up on the new release list, and I was like, okay, this is going to be pretty cool. The first thing I noticed was that they're going with the, I believe it's a new way they're going to be implementing surround sound in the streaming. I think it's called Axios, I'm not sure. It was on Tidal. But essentially, it created like a different oral experience for the user. So you could hear like, let's say different ad libs coming from different directions. You'll hear different drums and sounds like that coming from different directions. Now the album itself is dope. It's got the whole Black Soprano family. It's got all the flavors and the meal you need. It's got all the seasonings. It's got all the pieces. And next up I have Loyal to a Fault by Kerr. Brand new to me. I've never heard of him before. But I really like this because it was a lot of crisp mix to it. And it was... most of the music I couldn't really relate to, but the sonics of it was the best part to me. So this one, like I said, it's brand new, so I'm gonna sit with it a little longer. Third on the list, Flying High by LMD, and it's a little bit of similar, just like the Kerr album. Brand new to me, but again, I'm gonna sit with it a little longer. This one, it was more of a like a deeper listen as far as the complexity and the lyricism and things like that. But like I said, I'm gonna sit with this one a little longer. These are brand new releases. I'm just making sure you guys know what's out there. Fourth on the list, this one is actually probably out of the four, number 2 on the list for me. This is Mayhem Loren's Black Vladimir. Now, I've been listening to Mayhem Loren for about 2 years now. And that was after I had this long summer of listening to Action Bronson for a good minute. And he has this like really, really particular flow that if you listen to him long enough, he sounds like the second coming of Nas. It's weird. It's very weird, but he's fully Queens to the T. And this new project is like basically a super villain coming back for the third time type shit. Like, you thought it was over, but it's not over. It's an ill project, and the sound is super unique. He's one of those artists that doesn't really care about like what you feel like the beat should sound like, and that's what I like about it, because a lot of his beats, I don't know if they're like samples, originals or not, I don't really care, but it's very, 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 it's a pull to the ear every time you listen to his music, and I really love it. All right, and next up, I want to discuss with you guys some career development strategies I've learned. Now, I've been doing music since high school, and I graduated high school in 2010. So as far as me, my specialization is in songwriting. I've done live performance, I've played instruments and things like that, but I really, really love songwriting. But as an artist, especially an independent artist, you got to be well-rounded. And so here's some of the things I've learned. Here's 2 tips. So the first tip is that you want to be engaging in order to get engagement. So there was a long time where I would be making music and a lot of it would be just posted. Like, I would just make it, post it, and then hashtag it and just wait, right? But what I've learned is that it's not necessarily effective to work that way, but what you can do is you can post things like that and just keep it as is. But what you really want to do is you want to get people's attention as far as having a conversation with you, building rapport, or even just seeing your name pop up in their feed or their notifications a lot, right? So what I started doing is finding other artists, not really fans, because fans aren't the average fan today is not searching for new music. They usually get what comes to them and then stay in what's comfortable with them, right? So if you listen to, let's say, City Girls, you're probably not going to be looking for anything outside of that unless it just happens across you and it sounds dope. So I typically look for other artists, right? And the other artists, the big thing I notice about them is that they're not really looking for listeners, really. They're looking for like a community. They want to develop a community with people. And the best way I've learned to do that is to actually like engage with them directly. So you can do things like, hey, I think your latest track was dope, or actually like buy a track from an artist and things like that. But simple things like leaving a comment, responding to a story and things like that. All that, doing that constantly and consistently, and it's got to be organic. Like, you got to actually comment on things you enjoy and things that they actually like are posting and things like that. Make it organic. And as they see your name more and more often, you can build a rapport with them, and you can open the doors for possibly more collaborations. Maybe their fans maybe they may introduce you to their fans and things like that. Again, opening more possibilities for more people to enjoy your music. And the second thing I've learned was that there's a lot of skill building you can get through social media. Like, for example, with this channel, I'm here to teach you basically basic skills you can learn as an artist that are outside of, technically music and music theory. These are more of like soft skills you'll need as you're moving throughout and interacting with other artists and things like that. But you can learn these things such as music theory, scales. You can learn breath control. You can learn all these things through social media, but there's going to be work on your part as far as finding it, because like I said, just like how fans aren't looking for better and newer music, they're just sticking with what's comfortable. I've noticed a lot of artists, when they get to a certain skill level, they hit a plateau, and it's because they're maybe making enough money to where they don't need to really think about improving, or they're just comfortable, and maybe being an instrumentalist is where they want to be with their musicianship. That's why I say it's always good to be well-rounded as a musician. So this is something to think about. All right, and now the next topic I wanted to get into was the world news headlines. I have one big one, at least big for me, as far as theorizing how we may be improving the music industry in the future. So the biggest one I found I'm just going to read you the headline, and I'm just going to give my opinion on it. So the headline reads, "New tech may prevent school shootings." And from the articles I've seen, the technology is essentially identification software within cameras and other mediums that will allow them to identify when an intruder or a possible threat is carrying a weapon or maybe other things like a knife or combat equipment like a helmet or vest like that. And what will happen is that will signal to the system to send the entire building, let's say like a school or a bank or a government building, into lockdown. And I thought this was interesting because we've been having a lot of, incidents as far as gun violence and things like that in very, very sensitive places like schools and grocery stores and things like that. And it's a viable option, honestly, if this could work, right? And so how I'm making this relate to artists is, as I spoke in the beginning, there's a lot of violence in hip hop. Now, here's an example I just conjured up on the fly. So let's say you're in the studio, and we see it all the time. People with a past, people with beef, and gang members and things like that, and criminals. They're in the studios and they're working on their art and things like that, and shit goes down. But these studios, they sometimes have security cameras that they use after the incident to help report what happened in the incident. And here's how I'm assuming this could work for studios. Let's say you're in the studio and the cameras pick up an unknown vehicle or unknown personnel walking up to the security gate, and it pings a weapon or what may be a weapon, and it sends the entire studio into lockdown. So now the police are notified. The artists are essentially in what would be called a panic room and kind of safe for a moment as long as the police are responding properly, right? And this could help prevent possibly a lot more deaths as it pertains to music in hip hop. Now, I know this is like one of those issues where if they weren't gang members and they weren't criminals, then this wouldn't be a thing. I get it. But at the end of the day, we consume music from those people, and those people are people that work with us. So, and a lot of times people who go into the studios to work are there to work. Now, there is a conversation to be had. I may have this in another episode, but there is a conversation to be had about who we should be letting into studios. But I think that's more of on the studio owner's responsibility than it is the artists, because at the end of the day, the artist doesn't own and is not responsible for the studio unless they are. But it is what it is. But that's essentially what came to mind when I saw this technology. I was like, that may have been super important to prevent a lot of different in-studio, maybe in-concert incidents. So I want to know what you think in the comments. What do you think that technology would look like? How would we implement it? What are some other ways you may think of to improve it? And as we wrap up today, I'm gonna let you guys know what's my favorite song of the day. Now, today's favorite song comes from Armani Caesar. It's Ginger Roasting. Now, first off, the entire album that this song comes with, fire. I believe Westside Gunn himself produced it and pretty much sculpted this entire album, right? But the way Armani performs in this entire album is top notch. They made sure she didn't slack anywhere, right? And I appreciate that, because there's a big conversation in hip hop between like the male and female rappers, right? But I think the problem is that there's no cooperation between the male and female rappers, right? A lot of female rappers feel like they don't need any type of assistance in order to gain any type of notoriety in the hip hop game, which may be true. But wouldn't it be better if you cooperated with everyone, right? Or with the best of the best, right? And I see that's what happened here in this project, and it came out, in my opinion, perfect. It flies under the radar because it's one of Armani's like earlier like projects. So I feel like as she's gonna develop more as an artist, we start to get more and more music. She starts to work with maybe more producers, break outside of rap maybe. I don't know what she has planned, but this track right here, this one set it apart for me, because it has the glissandos on the piano that I need. It's got that chandelier feel. She's coming in with the rhymes that's like still gutter, but she's still delivering them like you're supposed to as a rapper, enunciating, getting that shit off, ringing it through, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, Ginger Roasting, Armani Caesar, the whole album's ill, but it's probably my favorite track on the album. And as we come to a close for the first episode of the first hip hop union. This is going to be the channel that's going to represent that, and we will be developing an actual hip hop union here. And we're going to start here with this YouTube community. I want to start here first, and as we start to implement more and more people and more ideologies and ideas and collaborating more, we're going to start to officially become a representation for artists throughout America. And I would prefer this to be kind of like chapter driven, because the idea of hip hop is to remain original, right? So if we can do chapters, that'd be awesome. But if we can do one singular headquarters and branch out, that'd be even better. I don't care. But we will be in control. And when I say we, I mean the artist. So if you're a musician, an artist, meaning like vocalist, rapper, painter, dancer, things like that, and you feel a deep connection to specifically hip hop, this will be your home. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. And remember, good people bring light into the world. And as artists, it is our job to reflect.